Welcome to As I Live and Grieve, a podcast that tells the truth about how hard this is. We're glad you joined us today. We know how hard it is to lose someone you love and how well-intentioned friends and family try so hard to comfort us. We created this podcast to provide you with comfort, knowledge, and support. We are grief advocates, not professionals, not licensed therapists. We are you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back again to another episode of As I Live and Grieve. Another great guest. I know I say it every week, but it's true. Somehow paths cross and it's destiny, maybe karma, call it what you will. With me today is Jonathan. Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Kathy. I'm honored to be here.
Oh, it's my honor, truly. To start us out, would you just give a little bit of your background so our listeners can get to know who is Jonathan?
That's an interesting question. Who is Jonathan? Just from a background perspective, professionally, I'm a dating and relationship coach, primarily helping women in midlife. And I say midlife is after baby making years and before retirement. So most of the people that work with me or follow me are between the ages of 42 and 69. And the reason why I target women is to help them understand men. Because women, it seems to me they're always Google search. Why do men do this and why do men do that? So I thought, well, I'll start a business helping women understand why men do everything they do, particularly in the romantic realm.
Yeah, bingo, for sure. Now, as I read your profile, your journey to where you are today actually started with a loss.
Well, it's interesting because to some degree, I know where you were going, and I'll just let your audience know, and I'm totally okay with this. Almost 7 years ago, I lost my 19-year-old son to an accident, and that grief did cause me to open up different portals in my life, emotionally speaking. The only reason why I had to pause for a second is I had another loss even before that when I went through a divorce.
Right.
And there was a gigantic emotional shift that happened in my life that happened maybe 10 plus years prior to my son passing away. So I had that loss. During my divorce, I also lost my job and I got wiped out in the market crash. So I had another series of losses, but bringing it back to my son passing away, in my grief, I'm going to share this with you, Kathy. Okay. When I was giving his eulogy, and, I'd written a script to share with everyone and, stories and that sort of thing. I paused in the middle of it and I said to everyone, his family, his friends, I said, look, we can grieve with suffering or we can grieve with love. And what I meant by that is I knew that he would not want me to suffer one day. But at the same time, I'm in deep pain. We are all in deep, real pain. And so the idea is to look at it from the lens of love. And then 2 months after he passed, I began writing a book about love. I'd been journaling about self-love because I'm like, what the heck is self-love anyway, which is the actual title of a book I published 9 months to the day after he passed. And while it's not a dating or relationship book and it's not a healing of grief book, it's just that I believe that self-love and the investment in the self builds emotional scaffolding so that when we do have a tragedy, a loss, that we have enough, I use the term emotional scaffolding to navigate the pain of a loss. And just to add to this equation, about 2 years ago, I was in a treasured relationship, someone I deeply cared for, and she didn't want to continue in the relationship. And boy, did I experience another level of loss. Yeah. Because, she's still alive, but it was the death of my dream because I wanted to marry this woman. Mm-hmm. And loss is part of our life on a regular basis.
Well, it certainly is. And I so appreciate you being so candid as to mention the other losses, because numerous times on this podcast, I have mentioned that we most frequently talk about loss by death.
Yeah.
Death of a spouse, death of a parent, death of a child. But grief is related to any loss. Yeah. And I even mentioned that a toddler who leaves their favorite stuffed animal behind in a restaurant or on an airplane, they grieve as well. They really do. I never
thought of it that way. Yeah.
They have just suffered a loss. So absolutely, the losses that you suffered it. And I usually will list them. I'll tick them off on my fingers. Yes, there's loss through death. There's also divorce. There's loss of a relationship. There's loss of a job. There's loss of your lifestyle, your finances and everything. And gosh, it sounds like I've ticked everyone off that you just listed.
Oh gosh,
So
yes. I mean,
that's a lot of loss, John.
I mean, I'm not laughing. I mean, it's more just that hearing the totality of it, because I forgot that at one point when I went through that financial loss, I used to live in a multi-million-dollar home, and I had to move in with my mother and father in a retirement community.
Yeah.
You know, and like there was a different emotional effect going on there. So yeah, no, I've hit every bucket, and I don't, by the way, and I don't want to invite anymore.
Yeah, well, no, I understand there. So it would be, to me, it's a natural segue, if you will, from your losses to self-love. And I say that because I remember standing in my living room, calling my daughter on the phone. This is probably, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks or so after my husband died 7 years ago. And I said to my daughter, Stephanie, I feel like I have to redefine my life. I'm not me anymore. The me I was even before Tom died, I'm not me. I can't go back to that me because my entire world is flipped upside down. And my path, my journey started out by appreciating a lot of the little things in my life. And I actually spent an entire weekend in some self-introspection, thinking about how I felt about different things. And I did gradually rebuild my life. I redefined myself. Not the same person at all that I was before Tom died. But my qualifier on that is that I can honestly say I am happier now than I have ever been at any other point in my life.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how what to some degree is a tragedy is a portal to another evolution of our soul, our spirit, our identity, as you will. And, you know, it's interesting because I wrote a book about self-love, right? What the heck is self-love anyway? And, you know, a lot of people like, what is self-love? And I want to kind of spend a moment kind of unpacking that the way I view it. And that is, when I think of self-love, I think of self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-reliance, self-discipline, all these juicy words. And the only reason why it's encapsulated in love is the love of self, not from a selfish point of view, but from a heart-centered view. But some people take a little offense to that even. So the way I characterize self-love is we all have an emotional 6-year-old inside of us. That little 6-year-old that, you know, the stuffed animal was left at the park and it's since gone, and we're grieving that. We all have an emotional 6-year-old inside of us. And I don't care if you're 100 years old, you still have got it.
Yeah.
And self-love is nurturing that emotional 6-year-old inside of us. And by the way, the age is irrelevant for those listening. I'm just picking at 6.
Right.
Is that we all have an emotional child inside of us that needs nurturing. So the question becomes, well, how do we nurture that little 6-year-old inside of us? When I look back at my trajectory, and I shared 20 years ago, going through a divorce, losing my high-end corporate job, and the market crash of 2008 and 9, well, not quite 20 years ago, close to 20 years ago. And my identity was crushed. I'll be candid with you. I got addicted to something. Now, and I'll be candid with you, I did drugs and alcohol, but that wasn't the addiction. The addiction was online dating. And I was going out on date after date after date after date. I mean, literally twice a week sometimes. That was my drug of choice. And after 1 year of doing this, I looked in the mirror and I would meet, by the way, Kathy, I'd meet a really nice woman, some nice date, something wasn't right. Meet another woman, nice date, nice woman, something right. And then I realized after a year is like, I'm the common denominator.
You're the something.
I was the common denominator. So that's when I began a journey of personal development, self-help, spiritual work, and therapy to start addressing what was going on inside of me. So the beginning of my journey was just an exploration. Well, I'll encapsulate everything in personal development, self-help.
Yeah.
And that included Tony Robbins, and that included Wayne Dyer and that. I mean, I could start going through the laundry list of people. But that was the beginning foray to self-love, if I pronounced that properly. That was the beginning to it for me, was just to start to nurture my soul through this kind of 40,000 foot realm. By the time my son passed away, I became much more granular in my work, and I did things like the Hoffman process and Insight Institute, and I started to do more therapy to really start to really understand my emotions and my feelings.
Right.
And more importantly, Kathy, to actually articulate my emotions and feelings, to be able to express myself to another person. Yeah. And I witnessed this metamorphosis of when I started to understand my emotions and feelings, and when I could talk about it in a way that actually can be seen, heard, and understood, instead of the way most people communicate their emotions and feelings, which sounds something like this. Wah, 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 wah. You know,
maybe think of the Peanuts show.
Exactly. There's just a lot of vomit of information, but without any real substance to what's really going on inside. And, you know, it's interesting because, as I shared earlier, about a year and a half ago, a little bit more than a year and a half ago, I was in a significant relationship with someone I deeply cared for. And despite all this work, and I want to own something for your audience. So I immediately went into that grieving with love, you know, being radical acceptance. And I was like, oh, you know, I can handle this, right? You know, in fact, I have a substantial YouTube channel, and she was a regular on it. And I had to share with my audience that she was no longer going to be here. And I'm like, I'm going to get through this. And sure enough, about 8 months in, if the universe didn't smack me upside the head and said, you know, you thought radical acceptance was going to help you grieve through this, you bypassed anger and, you know, like in the different stages of grief, right? You know, and I went through, was I in shock for a moment and depression and denial? But I immediately I bypassed it all, went to acceptance. And I didn't do the layers of grief.
You didn't do the work.
I didn't. And so I took my baseball bat to my pillow in my bedroom and I started to bash it all out because it was a big ouch. It was a big ouch to end a relationship that I was deeply in love. And by the way, we had I should share with your audience, a very amicable parting. It was a conscious uncoupling. We just had two different life trajectories. And as hard as that was to hear, it was actually, if it's not right for one, everybody listening to this, if it's not right for one, it is not right for both, okay? As much as we might want that. So I do believe that while the standard layers of grief, shock, denial, bargaining, anger, acceptance, all that kind of depression acceptance, is really honoring all of those spaces, grieving through love instead of judgment, suffering, victim consciousness, which what most people do when there's a loss, and please forgive me as I'm generalizing this when I say most people do this, they deny their feelings. And self-love is all about tapping into those feelings because that's what humanity is about.
Yeah.
It's not an intellectual exercise, it's an emotional experience. And if I can part any wisdom to everyone that's experiencing grief right now, it's about experiencing all those emotions and letting have your day, like the child doesn't care about crying and screaming. They're not thinking about what's, work the next day or whatever. They're just experiencing their feelings. And that's what I'm here to encourage everybody, is to experience their feelings.
Absolutely. There was so much wisdom in everything you just said that I just almost don't know where to start. I can find something. It's true. And self-love, as you mentioned, it's got to be, I love when you use the word scaffolding. I think and I can picture scaffolding and I can see all the parts and pieces. It's not just one thing. It's many things where you're scaffolded. So I really like that. So you are a dating coach primarily for women in midlife. Do you usually start out with a new client by working on their self-love or at least assessing it?
The answer is yes, but in a very remedial sense, to the extent that I don't go through their past traumas and their childhood and do any real deep dive there. I do make a request that the people I work with have done some inner work before they come to me, ideally. But to that extent, we do a cursory review of their past and try to identify their fears and limiting beliefs and negative patterns. Because if you have no awareness around it, it's like, what's the definition of insanity? Mm-hmm. Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And I think the other thing is, what I do as a coach is dismantle the story that we've all grown up with to some degree. I mean, I'm going to point the finger at Disney for a moment with the Cinderella story. But we are in an evolution in humanity right now where, thankfully, women aren't dependent upon men for financial survival. Now, I will always say 2 incomes is better than 1. So, and yet that there's such a traditional scripted narrative out there that I think blocks 50% of people to attracting what they want. So there's a little bit of the dismantling of it. And most importantly, coming at the dating marketplace from your heart will yield greater results than when we operate from ego or the mind or logical and that sort of thing. Now, let me be clear when I say heart, okay? It's about having a healthy heart, emotionally healthy heart that has that scaffolding, because you're going to get a couple, what is it? You're going to get some, you're going to kiss some frog, both sides, men and women, you're going to get some frogs. It's learning not to get attached to the wrong frog and open your heart to the right frog. So what I do is I teach discernment as a tool to at least put the odds more in your favor. I'll be candid with you, Kathy. The dating marketplace today, it's the Hunger Games.
An apt description. I love it.
It is the Hunger Games. And, working with a coach like myself is about putting the odds forever in your favor using the line from the movie or the books, excuse me. So, and I don't mean to say that in a defeatist, pessimistic point of view. I think the world no longer cultivates, we're no longer in an environment where we're surrounded by people that on a regular basis, and particularly those of us in midlife, are surrounded in an environment where we're interacting with people that are eligible for mating for midlife, because most of our friends are married or in a relationship. And when you get to that age, you're just not around enough single eligible.
Right.
And online dating was birthed. And for a while, online dating was great. It was a great tool, just like the smartphone is a great tool.
Yeah.
But now it's an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, online dating has conditioned us into a new addiction, just like I was addicted to it in those early stages after my divorce. And it's time to go back to a traditional approach of connecting with people from a heart-centered place. So it ain't easy. I'm going to tell you something, Kathy, a couple things. Dating a relationship is not for the faint of heart. I mean, you have to be willing to put your heart out there big time to get hurt, kind of thing. And sadly, today, we almost need ninja level skills, communication skills to really navigate the differences human beings have. And boy, are there difference ever. I don't care what couple you're looking at. There is not one couple out there that doesn't have some differences, and some have more than others. And it is navigating those differences that require love. And to some degree, a relationship is a daily grieving process. You're grieving the fantasy of love and having to deal with the reality of love.
Well, that's excellent perspective. It really is. I know I used Match.com in its very early days.
Yeah.
And, I connected with a number of gentlemen and met them, and, most of them just kind of went on their way. There's one that I still have a somewhat casual friendship, but, we're opposite ends of the country, so it's just an occasional email. After my husband died, I actually told myself, and even voiced it on this podcast, I have absolutely no desire at all to date or find another partner.
Yeah.
That was almost 7 years ago. Now I find myself in the back of my head thinking, well, the thing I really miss most about Tom is that every evening we would have conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, about sometimes the strangest thing. Sometimes it might be planning a vacation, planning a cruise. Once in a while, it would be politics. It frequently was military history because he was retired Army.
Okay.
Nonetheless, it was conversation.
Yeah.
And that's what I miss the most.
Yeah.
So how likely is it, for example, that one could find a person who is only interested in occasional conversation?
Well,
How specific can one get, I guess, is my question.
Well, okay, so I'm going to be candid with you. I mean, if that's all you want is conversation, it doesn't have to be wrapped in the fortune cookie of a romantic relationship. So, I mean, so to answer your question in that sense, you could find activity partners and people to have conversation with. And to some degree, a lot of people are doing it through a cyber way, whether it's text messaging, telephone calls, emails, that sort of thing. I'm not a fan of that as the only source of our emotional nourishment, but it certainly can fill the space in there. For romantic love, this is where it gets more complex because especially in midlife, many of us would like to, ride off on the sunset with somebody or grow old with somebody, that sort of thing. And it requires a lot more alignment because there's more moving parts to it.
Sure.
I want to honor something, though, within you, and that is you don't seem like you're operating from a place of desperation.
Oh, no.
And you're coming at it with kind of a full heart. I say this because I'm guilty of dating from a desperate place, that I need rescuing and stuff like. I'm going to own that I've operated from that vantage point. It's about part of self-love outside of a romantic relationship is being okay with your own company and liking your own company. And like, I will tell you, I talk to myself all the time. I have lots of conversations with myself, although I did try to talk to Chat GPT.
I was just going to say that.
Were you? No, I've been trying to see what that's like. And you know what? It really didn't thrill me as much. I do use it as a tool I use it for a variety of different professional capacities, but I tried it on a personal level and it didn't land for me because there's this juiciness it's the flaws of a human being that really makes the juiciness of connection.
Absolutely.
And I'll use a perfect example, the movie Harry Met Sally, or even the TV show Friends.
Yes.
Each of those characters on the TV show had their own little neuroses and things like that. That's what made them special. Sally was unique, and Harry fell in love with the peccadillos of her personality. And that's where a Chat GPT doesn't come to the table.
Absolutely.
With it.
Yeah.
And so even your late husband, he's very militant. I'm going to talk about military history. And he's like, I hope that they at least go, well, tell me something that you like. I hope you at least, he did that because it should be, and when I say the word should, I believe healthy communication is where two people can express from the heart. And two people are listening from the heart, okay? Emphasize that. It's not just talking from the heart, but it's listening from the heart. And honestly, that's a skill. That's something we have to learn because, boy, is our ego fighting to be seen and validated and all this stuff. And so even in the grieving process, when I've looked at the myriad of the losses I've had, part of my experience is to be like, it's almost I wonder if the universe created all this because I put this outward projection, see me, I'm hurt, see me, I'm hurt, see me, I'm hurt. And I'm now owning that, you know what, I'm not hurt, I'm not a victim. Yeah, a bunch of shitty things happened to me, but I'm still standing and I'm very grateful for that emotional scaffolding that's holding that.
Right. Now, you may have alluded to this in one of your little pieces, but if there's a new couple and they have decided that maybe they're going to give this relationship a try, whether they met online, face-to-face, or whether it was from that well-intentioned friend saying, I got a guy for you, or I got a gal for you, and we know those people exist as well. Do you have any thoughts, any tips, any early warning signs that maybe this relationship is not a good idea?
Well, this is a great question. And I wish I could say this one thing, ask this one question, because that's going to give you insight into it. There isn't some magic formula. However, given that most people have experienced a couple relationships in their life, in some cases there's divorce, or some cases they might have lost a beloved, or they've just had a multiple series of relationships. I think our past gives us a little clue into our future. And so what you may want to get a sense of their past relationships, get some sense of that experience.
Okay.
And what you're looking for is really, this is where you almost have to be a detective. You have to really be actively listening. Do they seem stuck in the past?
Okay.
In other words, is there blame? Is there judgment? Is there criticism about their past partners? And they take no ownership as to the ending for them. Now, with the one when you lose a loved one,
right,
with a transition, that's not the same. But I mean, given that 75% of singles over 45 years old are divorced,
right,
you know what? Most likely. And so that's what you're looking for is, do they take any ownership on their part to the ending of the relationship? And if they take zero ownership, that's a red flag. And look, I understand anyone listening, there are people that have been in abusive, toxic relationships.
Yep.
I am not discounting that one
Yep.
bit, but there's still some culpability. And while you're looking for that some culpability, that's at least enough awareness that they go, oh, I have to work on this for a future relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Because without that awareness, they're just going to take their old patterns into the new relationship.
Absolutely. I love that answer. And speaking as someone who has been in a toxic, violent relationship with someone who was clinically diagnosed as psychotic,
Okay.
I did take some ownership. And my ownership was the fact that I didn't care enough about myself to consider how I needed to get out of this relationship.
Yeah.
So that's my ownership.
Bravo.
So, yeah, that possibility is there. But I love your answer to kind of check on how they speak, at least about their history and the relationship that came before yours, relationship, because that will give you some insight, I think, into how things might go. All right. One other thing. Now, if you are newly dating or newly partnering with someone and you know that that person has lost their partner by a death. So we're talking about the most common grief that this podcast speaks of, for example. What do you have to consider about yourself to be supportive in that relationship? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm going to answer that question in like I'm going to look at the prism a little differently.
That's fine.
So when I lost my son, it's interesting how and I was dating at that particular time, I noticed a number of women that really struggled with empathy.
Really?
And some, interesting enough, as nurturing and loving as women are, I experienced some women that had a block to empathy. In other words, because it triggered their own fear of their loss of their child. Okay.
All right.
And so what was interesting is I began noticing this, and I don't think there's an accident, because I think I do what I do for a living. And maybe the reason why I'm still single is because I'm just meant to be a teacher and not, think about from that vantage point. So what I began observing is what was their level of empathy around this experience. And so when it comes to, here's the challenge in dating and relationships for midlife, particularly for women, and since I coach women, is if you'd lost a spouse, how empathetic is this other person to this loss? Now, men are territorial. So on some level, we want you to forget that person. We want you to operate from a clean slate.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe that if you lost a spouse and a person could be empathetic, knowing, hey, I may still have a photograph in the house of them because my children are in those pictures. Or if you had wedding pictures all over, if you had every photo you had with your partner who passed away, I wouldn't want to date you because I think you're still stuck in the past, kind of thing.
Right.
So
Understood.
as the person wanting to go out with a person who lost someone, I'm looking for that. But on the flip side, what I would want to be looking for is some level of empathy, knowing, hey, I'm going to have a bad day, and I might be thinking of my beloved I was with for 32 years. And yes, that is part of this experience. Can you hold space for me?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'd probably be looking for. And honestly, I've never answered that question before, Kathy, so I really appreciate it because I did this on the fly, but I feel like that. I feel true in my heart that that's the way to operate.
Well, that answer, you may want to, once this podcast is released, you may want to go back and listen to it and write it down because that to me was textbook perfect. That is exactly what I think you need to look for in that other person.
Yeah.
Is that empathy? Because that's going to be the
sympathy, not sympathy, not sympathy. Empathy. Yes. No, you didn't say that, but I want to emphasize this, everyone. I got a lot of sympathy for the loss of my son, but there were only a few people that could really be empathetic to it.
Yes. No, I agree 100%. I think empathy in this situation, and I'm going to remember that, and that is going to get used in other podcasts. I'll tell you that right now. But
I gave you two things.
You did, but I will attribute it to you.
Okay, good.
Okay. Well, sadly, our time is winding down. So this is the point in my podcast where I actually turn the microphone over to my guests. And this is your opportunity to speak directly to the listeners. Tell them a little bit about your services, what you might offer them, anything you want to tell them without me interrupting with a question. The floor is yours.
Well, first, I have to honor and acknowledge you, Kathy. This has been a blast for me. You really, actually, this has been a real treat. So I just want to first honor, and you're a great interviewer. So thank you. For those listening, if anything I said resonated with you, if you feel like this could help you in your life, first off, if you want to connect with me, Kathy will have a bunch of links that will take you to my website. It'll take you to my YouTube channel. I'm sure it'll take you a few other places. You can certainly click. If this did make a difference in your life, I'd love it if you'd write me a note and go to my website and write a message there. You can just click the link to contact me. That would mean a lot to me. But more importantly, I want to just impart everyone. When we think of the word love, romantic love, agape, all the different forms of love, ultimately, one of the hardest things we can do is turn that inward and just nurture that little 6-year-old inside of us. So I just invite everybody to consciously take care of that little 6-year-old if you can every day, because you know what? Life ain't easy, man. It ain't easy. There's a lot of loss and grief, but just like a child, if we nurture that little 6-year-old inside of us, just like Kathy is happy every day, hopefully we can feel the same. So that's my invitation for everyone.
Yeah, I wonder maybe should I name my child inside me?
I have a name for mine.
Oh, anything you can share?
Yeah. Well,
never mind. I don't want to know. I don't want to.
No, let me just say this. I have parts of me, and I immediately went to that part of me, my shadow. I don't have a name for my sweet little 6-year-old other than my own name.
Yeah. Well, that whole idea of an inner child resonates because sometimes in my podcasts, I ask what may be the simplest question of all. And I always call it my toddler question because I remember my kids asking those questions that should be just so obvious, but at any rate. So, Jonathan, thank you again for taking the time. You have said so many things that I know are going to resonate with our listeners. And I just know that many, including myself, are going to go back and take a second listen because sometimes you just kind of get caught up in conversation and you think, wait, what did he say about? So that's one of the nice things about podcasts is you can do that. Yeah. To our listeners, thank you for taking the time, for tuning in again. This podcast, like some of the others, is part of our special series of Weekend With. So I hope you like the fact that this is an extra episode, a bonus, if you will, because this topic, this perspective, I think, is something that we really, really need to listen to. We need to hear it. We need to consider it. We need to take it to heart. And along with the self-care that I'm always preaching, I'm now going to add self-love. They're both very important. So please take care of yourselves and tune in again next time as we all continue to live and grieve.
Thank you so much for listening with us today. Do you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, or do you have a question from one of our episodes? please email us at info@asiliveandgrieve.com and let us know. We hope you will find a moment to leave a review, send an email, and share with others. Join us next time as we continue to live and grieve together.